Hello, and welcome to the 31st video in my Punishing Graven lore series. Today we will cover the 21st chapter of the main story, Spiral of Chronos. Ever since the incident on the lunar base, Lee has spent most of his time away from Grey Raven, working alongside the Science Council to create a next-generation frame, even more advanced than Imperia. With the Inver device files Vanessa retrieved from the surface, their magnum opus can finally be completed. But faced with a brand new crisis, Lee will need to confront odds greater than any he has ever seen, to free humanity and himself from the shackles of fate, and forge a path built on new possibilities. Now without any further delay, let's dive into Chapter 21, Spiral of Chronos. On an ordinary day in Babylonia, Murray runs through his list of daily tasks. Soon after, Vera barges into his office, giving him a data chip and a mission report file, and with this final submission, Vera is now free to act on her own will. He takes the file down to the Parliament building, where he has a brief conversation with Sika, the top commandant of the most recent graduating class. After parting ways with Sika, Murray makes his way down the hall and knocks on the door to Nicola's office. After handing over the files, he thinks about the warning he just received. For some time now, Nicola has been aware that Murray's information comes from a gray area as far as legality is concerned, but often overlooks it due to the benefits. However, if Murray is ever busted, every contribution up to this point would be worthless. He has long understood the risk, but couldn't care less if it helps with the development of Lee's frame. After all, he remembers the times when Lee would carry the burden of life for the both of them. All the times when Lee would work through the night trying his hardest to support them both. It wasn't until years later that Murray got access to the construct files regarding Lee, and he learned all of the suffering his brother went through. And since that point, Murray has never stopped moving forward, trying to repay that debt and ease his burdens in any way he can. Meanwhile, Lee arrives at Asimov's lab, wanting to explore a new hypothesis relating to heteromer shards. They open the files and Asimov is shocked to see the missing pieces of Shom's research on the language of the punishing virus, along with data scrubbed from Chrono experiments. Lee taps Shom's audio log, and what plays is a theory that could change the very idea of what the virus is. He proposes that the virus might be some sort of filter from a higher dimension, or maybe a rogue cosmic event, but as it stands now, these remain just speculation. But with this newfound data, they managed to decode a quarter of the information in the shard Bianca brought back. Naturally, such a development can't be kept secret for long, so Asimov agrees to play along while Lee comes up with a reasonable excuse. With all that being said, this isn't the information he initially wanted to discuss. From a recent botched frame adaptation test, he found a set of strange coordinates. About a week ago on a routine mission to Earth, Lee decided not to go with the rest of Grey Raven, and instead went to a separate area for investigation. The Science Council had been stumped by a series of nonsensical data fragments within the heteromer shard, and after some time they decided to simply write them off as background noise. That is, until Lee managed to crack the message. The key wasn't some secret code held by one of the factions, but rather it came from a children's game, one only known by him and Murray. He searches the surrounding buildings and finds a small robot sitting in a corner. Trying to learn anything he can, he connects to it, and finds its memory shell has been used to store data entries. The more he looks into the machine, the weirder things start looking. The code is complicated and confusing, but not to him, because it looks exactly like the code he used to write. Suddenly, a violent earthquake shakes the ground, causing the nearby buildings to collapse, forcing him to make a hasty retreat. This is the reason he gives Asimov for why the data is incomplete, and while quite coincidental that the earthquake would interrupt Lee's search when it did, Asimov hints at the possibility it wasn't a coincidence, that maybe it was planned, and might share some relation with the Everwinter that both Liv and Bianca saw while infected by the virus. As Asimov gets back to work, Lee clutches the data chip in his pocket. He has one more video recording he hasn't brought up, specifically because of what was recorded. A conversation between a mysterious man and an all-too-familiar robot. As the two mysterious figures discuss the remnants of Shom's research, the name of an agent continues to pop up in their conversation, the Merciful One. While their voices are heavily processed, Lee can instantly recognize Murray from the way he speaks. Hearing Asimov's voice, Lee snaps himself back to reality as he finishes prepping the frame for its next round of adaptation. Celica briefs Commandant about the situation on the surface, and that the previous earthquake is abnormal for a variety of reasons. On top of the epicenter not being near a fault line, the quake brought with it a slight rise in vowel concentration. Grey Raven, along with many other task force squads, will be sent to the surface to investigate the cause of the quake, repair damages, and find out what caused the increase in viral density. They soon arrive in the city, with Liv analyzing and recording all changes in damage levels and viral concentration. Since the battle at Copperfield Aquarium, the appearance of hetero creatures has been sparse, and even the red tide itself has become more docile. Alongside the near completion of the lunar base's reconstruction and new advancements in specialized frames, things are looking almost too positive for humanity. However, Commandant is no stranger to the calm before the storm, and knows not to let that feeling of peace get to him. They are soon picked up by Bridget, who catches them up to speed on the conservation area's status. Their biggest issue is the lack of personnel, but with the increasing number of defectors, many squads are finding themselves under investigation on Babylonia, so most of the squads being sent down are scraped together from the few available teams. Speaking of missing members, Bridget brings up the noticeable lack of Lee. After the battle for the aquarium, Commandant only managed to speak with Lee once, taking the time to remind him that despite his first instinct of taking everything upon himself, he has teammates he can rely on, that whenever he calls will come running to his aid. The cabin falls silent as they arrive at the conservation area, and as soon as they step out, the ground begins to rumble. Lee remembers the day he turned into a construct, the coldness of the lab, and the indescribable pain. From that day on, he served as Chronos' weapon. That is, until a naive Commandant appeared and made him a promise, to treat constructs as valued partners. And to his surprise, that Commandant lived up to it, so that's why he doesn't ever want them to see him struggle. While they fight on the surface, he will fight his own battle, and return to Greyraven even better than he was. He inserts the cable into his neck like he's done so many times before, and runs through the battle simulation like it's second nature. However, when he tries to leave, the simulation distorts around him, as scenes from his mind cloud his vision. For everyone on the outside, his mind overload lasts mere seconds. To him, far longer. At the Science Council, they go over the results of the trial, and find no indication of abnormalities in his mind. The Omega weapon and Inver device are working just fine at keeping the frame immune, which is why the resulting data seems completely normal. His mind overloads are getting progressively worse, and yet after the testing ends he somehow manages to recover, as if it never happened. And while they discuss the results, Lee hears a small voice in the back of his mind. "Trust me." Snapping him out of his shock, Asimov brings up the idea of getting Commandant involved, and Lee wastes no time rejecting it. He knows that this issue would only worry Commandant, or worse, if he joined in the experiment, it might have some unknown negative effect on him. Suddenly there is a knock on the door, and Murray enters the room to drop off Nicola's file. After handing the file over to Asimov, that concludes the day's trials, and having some free time, the two brothers take their leave. They make their way to a secluded area of the bridge, and Lee brings up the small robot he found in the city. Murray tries to find any way to get himself out, but it's no use. After all, Lee taught him just about everything he knows. Not even his communications with Lamia remain secret, as she was using his identification number, a number she could have only gotten if they were communicating beforehand. He knows Murray is keeping secrets, because he has the same look in his eyes Lee did when they were younger, when he would lie about his job to ease Murray's anxiety. Suddenly, Murray stops mid-sentence and collapses from an excruciatingly painful headache. After a minute he recovers, and their terminals begin sounding off, as the situation on the surface has taken a turn for the worse. About 20 minutes ago, the Parliament finished up another routine meeting regarding the situation on Babylonia. They have taken too many refugees since the Palia Forest incident, and are burning through resources faster than they can be replenished. Additionally is the issue of defecting constructs, and a new bill to restrict their autonomy. However, this discussion is cut short by an emergency call from Celica. There was an extremely high virus reaction from the surface, and Babylonia was hit with an electromagnetic pulse, causing a large number of constructs and citizens to go mad. As if on cue, a security guard in the corner of the room lashes out, his gun aimed squarely at Hassan's chest. On the ground, the quaking is far stronger than what was initially observed. Buildings topple over, and the ground fractures as people run for cover. Bridget hands over a set of keycards, and they make their way to the basement of the command center. Using the car in the emergency command station, they head to Conservation Area 27, trying to get in contact with any of the other ground teams. The closer they get to the epicenter, the stronger the virus reaction, and the more hetero creatures appear. While clearing out the stragglers, they meet Sika, who is the one who sent out the SOS call after being separated from her team. While planning their next steps, they are contacted by the main command station, and for the first time they get visuals on the epicenter. A large crimson tower spirals towards the heavens, and even worse is the number on screen. That level of viral density would render even the best protective suits useful for mere moments. Unlike Palia Forest, this tower doesn't bother hiding itself. Instead, it makes its presence known, an open challenge to all of humanity. The guard pulls the trigger, leaving Hassan with no time to react, when Litz of all people takes the bullet himself before incapacitating the guard, thanks to the help of a bulletproof vest below his suit. Nicola joins the two, and they fight off the approaching council members. Suddenly the parliament doors are kicked open, and Collins, along with General Wells, have arrived to rescue those who are still sane. Together they make their way to the communications center to send out an emergency broadcast. Meanwhile, Hippocrates calls Asimov, and the two try to figure out what is happening and how to fix it. Asimov's instincts as a scientist tell him the cause of this incident is the hetero tower that appeared on the surface, but with that dense level of a virus concentration, and Kamu unable to get there in time, there's only one frame capable of getting near the tower. Lee arrives at the landing pad and is stopped by two constructs, who apparently have orders to prevent any others from proceeding further. In fact, everyone present has conflicting orders, spreading even more confusion through their ranks. In the midst of this, Lee receives a call from Asimov, and he explains the situation on the surface, and that Hyperrail has been fully adjusted. As much as he doesn't want to, Asimov places all the responsibility on Lee's shoulders. As of right now, Babylonia has fallen. On the ground, Grey Raven continues on towards the coordinates of Sika's team, but the closer to the tower they get, the more unnerving the atmosphere. Suddenly, everyone begins hallucinating the scent of the ocean or the taste of food, while a red cloud expands outwards from the tower. The mine beacon contamination gets worse, and Sika, along with the rest of the constructs, drop. Having experienced this before, Comandant manages to brace himself just in time, but all the same he ends up unconscious, not from the contamination, but from a strike to the back of his head. As he regains consciousness, the visage of a panicked Harley Joe comes into view. Commandant and the constructs have been bound as Harley rambles on about them being traitors, as he steps forward to kill Commandant and avenge his fallen comrades. In the nick of time, Commandant manages to cut through the ropes holding him, and pins Harley, sedating him with Sika's tranquilizer gun. Soon after, the others come back to their senses, and they find themselves having already arrived at the foot of the tower. They receive a call from Asimov, who explains the nature of the tower and that the light from its summit is responsible for the mine beacon contamination. But they aren't given the chance to ask any more questions, as their terminals start ringing, SOS calls from the other unaffected squads. However, in the distance are the reinforcements Harley called before being pacified. Commandant orders Grey Raven to prepare themselves for combat, intending to hold off the constructs until the reinforcements arrive. While on his way to the Science Council, Lee rescues as many straggling humans as he can, ushering those out in the open to any of the various shelters. Having ensured the safety of the civilians, he heads to the Science Council building and finds Asimov behind a research station, suffering from a gunshot wound. He needs Asimov's authentication and the activation parameters to activate the frame, and unfortunately he's out of commission. And with Asimov's habit of not writing anything down, Lee has to get creative. The activation parameters were based off the collected heteromorph shards, so if he were to be infected, would he also be able to access the data within the virus? As things are in Babylonia, he doesn't have much of a choice, so he grabs Asimov's keycard and heads to the containment lab. He takes a shard and forces it into his chest as pain rips through his body. Memories flood through his mind, the past he lived, and the futures he might. They all swirl together through every part of him back to the shard. Finally, he finds the parameters he was looking for and wrenches the shard from his body. His efforts have rewarded him with the activation key he needs, and with it he runs back to the lab. He enters the pod and transfers himself into the new frame, as a suffocating number of scenes fill his mind. Seconds turn into hours as he watches, failing to grasp their meaning as they flow past. While he successfully managed to force activate the frame, a lack of authorization has left all combat systems disabled, and without them, he's nothing more than an expensive decoration. Meanwhile, Grey Raven continues to fight through the hetero creatures surrounding the tower, when the communicator Lee gave Commandant begins to ring, and they get their first communication from Babylonia since the incident began. Lee requests access to his frame's combat functions, so he can fight his way inside the tower and destroy it. While largely against the plan, Commandant knows they are out of options. Babylonia will soon re-enter the tower's range, and once it does, the second impact will destroy whatever is left of humanity aboard the Ark. With this, he agrees, under the condition they stay connected at all times. In this frame, Lee's mind is highly unstable, and the effects it could have on Commandant are unknown. But he wasn't able to be there for Liv to stop her suffering, and he refuses to allow it to happen a second time. No matter the risk, any burden they bear, they will bear together. Under that condition, Commandant unlocks the restrictions on Lee's frame, and he rushes out of the lab. While the humans present pose little threat, the same cannot be said about the maddened constructs swarming the Science Council, but even they stand little chance against Hyperreal. He fights his way towards the hangar, and pilots a shuttle back down towards the surface. After parting ways with Lee, Murray noticed something off about his mission details. After attempting to reach out, he finds all of Babylonia in the middle of a crisis. In the midst of the chaos, he sees two Control Corps members, Lesty and Ishmael, helping civilians. After asking about Lee's whereabouts, they tell him he was just seen in combat near the hangar. Once again, Murray has been left behind as Lee pushes forward, but to his surprise, Ishmael offers him some words of encouragement, and with his nerves steeled, he begins fighting back in his own way. Ishmael looks like Gestalt's projection of Earth, the light of the tower, this staircase that can lead humanity to greater heights. Humanity has reached this junction far too soon. They are not prepared. The voice of Gestalt echoes in her head that no one can stop the coming calamity, not even Nanami as she is now. But what about a different Nanami, one who has seen the truth of the world? Her gift has already made it into the hands of the one who needed it most. Similarly, Vonnegut has also noticed the early arrival of the tower and is sure of one thing. That tower is deeply connected to the Ascension network, and as the ones connected to the network, any changes will impact them as well. This is not only a test for humanity, but for the Ascendants, including those who have been left behind the scenes for quite some time, like Roland and the long-lost Lamia, who has been posing as one of the defected constructs within Vonnegut's ranks. Meanwhile, in the shadow of the tower, the frail figure of Lithos emerges, having been reborn once again, alongside a brand new Ascendant named Lilith and an all-too-familiar figure. Lee's transport speeds towards the Earth, as his radar warns of immediate contact with the Hetero creatures swarming the planet. He prepares to pull the throttle, to use his speed to circle the skies and look for a safer route, when a strange vision tears through his mind. He sees himself after an imminent crash, as he, along with the flaming wreckage of the transport, plummet to the ground. Looking for the source, he finds a Hetero creature clinging to the back of his thrusters. What will happen if he attacks? He doesn't have the time needed to think of scenarios. Speed up, charge in. The words force their way to the front of his mind. But why? He doesn't have time for theories. He drops the craft into a near nosedive. The Hetero creatures behind him don't have time to catch up, while those in front are smashed to pieces, when suddenly another vision, this time of small Hetero creatures, formed from the gore left on the ship. They gnaw through the armor, the cockpit, and eventually his own body. He detonates the incendiary bombs, and the fireball burns everything to ash, even the wings, turning the transport into a flaming streak in the sky. He jumps out of the transport as flaming scrap falls around him, using the recoil of his cannon at the last moment to slow his descent. Finally, he steps foot in the tower, and a wave of nostalgia washes over him. Has he been here before? A series of voices whisper into his ears, warnings and regrets with unknown origins. He searches through the tower, hunting for any path that leads him forward. Before him is an infinite sea of information, of past and futures, fragments of time, records of every decision he did and did not make. This is not his first time in the tower. His mind begins to break down, yet a single lighthouse shines in the distance, keeping him grounded. Commandant's mind beacon, and standing in front of him, to no surprise, is Commandant himself. Nearly giving in to the relief of his presence, Lee remembers those regretful words and pushes him away, severing the mind connection, and with it the mind overload begins again. As he breaks down, a figure stands before him bidding another farewell. He reaches out his hand, begging for answers, only to find himself back on Babylonia as if waking from a dream, only to be pulled back out by Commandant, preventing him from being lost in the storm of information. The figure reappears to tell him the truth of the tower. Its early descent has left all of humanity save for Lee unprepared. As such, he must pay the price and reach the summit on a path paved by him alone. This attempt, however, has already ended in failure, as too much time has passed. He looks down at Commandant in his arms, soaked in blood, and as one lighthouse fades away, another takes its place. Murray. Together, the two brothers make their way to the Band of Light, the starting point to an infinite number of possibilities. Under the gaze of this gatekeeper, he reads the message hidden within the Heteromer shards, and with this knowledge, he screams into the past, all to forge a better future. On a routine mission like any other, Lee clears out a section of the city when he's suddenly hit with a splitting headache. Afterwards, he finds a set of encrypted coordinates in his mind, coordinates he knows he didn't place there himself. Eventually, he decides to investigate this clue and see where it leads. On his way, he finds another task force member, and at the target location they find an electromagnetic observation device, a small machine with few applications, but one Lee decides to keep with him from now on. He jumps out of the transport as flaming scrap falls around him, using the recoil of his cannon at the last moment to slow his descent, and finally he steps foot inside the tower as a wave of nostalgia washes over him. Has he been here before? But even that thought brings with it a sense of deja vu. He activates the electromagnetic observation device built into the frame, but suddenly stops. When was this installed? Why would such a small, inconspicuous device be part of the frame in the first place? Of course, within his memory, he knows these answers, but why is he so certain it will be useful? Using the observation device, all the hidden paths within the tower are clear as day. Had he not taken the time to investigate those coordinates that day, he wouldn't have had this with him. It all seems like a coincidence, but he can't shake the feeling it might be something much more. The tower is a physical manifestation of the converging worlds Lee inhabits. It twists and turns, changing according to his actions, as if it's some sort of living entity. He strides forward with the will to solve any crisis, but even so, he is not alone. While no messages or communications can be sent to the outside world, he still maintains his connection to command it. Unlike those days in Chronos, he no longer fights alone. He has a team of comrades who support him, and who he supports in turn. No matter what, that mind beacon still shines bright, guiding him through the unknown, letting him know that outside they are still fighting, so he can't give anything less than his all. At the top of the staircase, he finds himself on a platform, and to his shock, he's not alone. On the other side is himself, another Lee. Together they break through the tower's defenses, fighting their way to the top where they find the core. Now one step closer to ending this crisis, they are met by yet another familiar face. This Lee of another world makes it clear that this is as far as they go, but Hyperreal never existed in the other timelines, so it may be the edge needed to ascend further. And with the help of this other Lee, they open a path forward. Like many times before, he enters into this strange mind space, but without the company of the Lees he's been fighting alongside. This mind space is the culmination of all the Lees across every timeline. Their memories coalesced here, providing the next Lee guidance to ascend further. Those flashes of memory, the mind overloads, all messages from the future to lead him here. All the versions of himself are no more than remnants in the mind space, already having been annihilated. In the end, none of them passed the filtering trial. Now it's up to him to reach the pinnacle, to rewrite the rules of the tower, and to end the nightmare. Lee successfully manages to open the barrier and shatters the core, as the glow of the electromagnetic waves fade. He has brought Babylonia some time, but it will not last forever. For his final trial, the tower will manifest an enemy from his past, one he hated and feared, who proved a source of regret. While none so far have managed to succeed, this time is different. As of right now, he is the nexus of all causality. Everything hinges on him. Condensed virus drips from the core, molding itself into the most formidable enemies Lee has ever faced. In Pulia Forest, he stood no chance, and the twins dealt the planet a wound it has yet to heal from. But now things have changed. He stands before them as the culmination of mankind's technological evolution, and plans to show them just how far they've come.
あなたたちの時間は僕が制する。これで終わりです。
Outside the tower, it has been 2 hours since the EM pulse left Babylonia paralyzed. They are surrounded and outnumbered, not even able to trust each other, as the light threatens to steal their sanity. Even Commandant, with all his resistance, is slowly but surely losing control. At the same time, Chrome and Strikehawk arrive just in time to save Lucia from an ambush. Together they gather the remaining constructs, preparing to break through to the base of the tower, hopefully securing a safe place for Lee after his descent. While on Babylonia, Murray and Cerberus fight a battle of their own, trying to rally those who can fight. In a situation like this, Murray was sure he'd be overtaken by worry, but ever since that conversation, where the two brothers made a promise to each other, no more secrets, no more lies, to be open, and to trust, the only feeling in his heart is unwavering confidence in Lee. He can't help fighting on the surface, but that doesn't make him helpless, far from it. So he covers the things Lee can't, and will make sure everyone on the surface has a home to return to. After passing his trial and defeating the twins, Lee finds himself somewhere unexplainable, some distorted dimension where time becomes moldable. He can see everything, the birth and death of galaxies, all of humanity's history flowing in and out of his mind at the speed of light, every past and future attempt of himself ascending the tower. This is not his first time here. The space in front of him coalesces into a pair of eyes looking through his very being. This is the domain of a Watcher, the gate that leads to a higher plane of existence. The tower is merely a symbol of evolution for both humanity and the virus. As the virus evolves by imitating humans, humans too can harness the virus to achieve the impossible. These Watchers await the day humanity's evolution peaks and they earn their place in the heavens, all to break the rules of the world that bind them all. This Watcher offers Lee a test of its own. An entity shimmers into reality. He dodges its attacks as projections of himself do the same. A phantom hands Lee his weapon, their trump card, their memories of all the battles fought against this being. Here at the edge of existence, he will overcome every obstacle and shatter the spiral of Chronos, threatening what he holds dear. It lasts only a moment, or perhaps a million years. As he is now, time has no meaning. Every failure gives more information he sends to his past self, and as long as Hyperreal can be activated, there will be a new Lee to take his place, carrying the torch and forging a path to new possibilities. His bullet pierces through layers of defenses, through the gaps in space, and finally through the body of the Watcher. With that, he has earned the right to pass through the gate and ascend, but his duty is not to the greater universe or a higher dimension. It is to prevent the chaos brought about by this tower. This is his answer as Lee of Greyraven. This being warns him that once he leaves, he will lose what he has gained within the tower, the ability to perceive the future, along with the memories that come with it. But that matters little, as he has people on the outside waiting for him. He opens his eyes to find he's back at the top of the tower, and this time makes his way to the core unopposed. Everything has been leading up to this moment: the Omega weapons, research on the Inver device, and the language of the virus. Together they form the key, and the lock is staring right at him. With it, he rewrites the logic of the tower, from release and vitalize, to absorb and destroy. Now it's his turn to exploit the virus, by turning the tower meant to end humanity into its greatest asset. On the outside, the Babylonian forces have dwindled to their last. Commandant can barely maintain control of himself, but as the linchpin holding together all the constructs present, he doesn't have a choice. This entire endeavor has been a lesson in recklessness, one big gamble on a single person. But as long as he can feel Lee fighting, he will burn himself to the core. That is the trust he has in Greyraven. The others are so occupied keeping themselves in the fight, They don't notice the butchered remains of a Hedo creature crawling towards Commandant. With the last of his strength, he grabs a rock, the first and most primitive of humanity's tools, and brings down his hand on its head, and the world is engulfed in a white light. On both Babylonia and the surface, those affected by the madness wavelength are collapsing to the ground in mass. The tower, once an ominous scarlet, is now bathing the land in a calm blue hue. The Hedo creatures don't even have time to register what's happening before the virus is wrenched from their bodies. With a moment of respite, they rush to Commandant's side, as a commotion stirs at the base of the tower. Surrounded, Lee finds himself in quite a peculiar situation, not being used to so much attention. After quite the eventful day, Commandant takes the first step. Before any formalities, reports, or frame inspections, he welcomes back a valued friend and treasured comrade, Lee of Grey Raven. In the end, he didn't lose his team, nor is he alone anymore, and for the first time in a long time, he can't help but smile. In the month following the tower incident, Babylonia was likely the busiest it's been since its creation, with the new need to restock parts, repair equipment, and help injured personnel demanding the formation of a whole new department. Meanwhile, Nicola and Wells discuss a new plan. The tower has brought a not unwelcome result, an area with zero punishing virus. With it, humanity has a real chance to build a permanent base on the surface. This is the beginning of Project Genesis, humanity's first reclamation city. I can't say anything. The video's already 30 minutes, and if I talk about all the stuff I want to talk about, we'll be here for another 30. I have so much I want to say that I have to just loop back around and say nothing. 10. Absolute cinema. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next video where we cover chapter 22 of the main story, Renaissance du Fantastique.